welcome to Health Alert. I'm Pam Butler. Today we're going to talk about domestic violence and issues that affect teen or youth. Joining me is Angela Mitchell. She's with Domestic Violence Intervention Services. She's the Education Coordinator. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before we get into some specific issues, I want you to tell people about Domestic Violence Intervention Services, also called DVIS, right?
Right. So we are a local domestic violence agency, one of the largest in Oklahoma. We are one of the only agencies that is a COA agency, which means we have been accredited. We also are one of the largest in the state, which means we have an umbrella of services under our roof. And so some of our services include counseling, children's counseling, batterers treatment intervention. We also have crisis, walk-in, advocacy, hospital advocacy, and just several other services that we're able to offer the community.
Okay, now when you say that you're accredited, tell our viewers a little bit about that. Is this where there's a state agency that comes in and looks at the kind of programming you're doing and certifies those as being of excellent quality? Exactly what does certification mean?
Absolutely.
And who's doing it?
The COA, Council of Accreditation, is an agency that comes in and basically makes sure that we're offering services that are in excellence. So when we have crisis counseling and advocacy, they give us certain guidelines that we have to abide by to make sure that people that are coming into our agency are receiving the best services possible in this area.
Now, is this a yearly accreditation or accreditation that lasts, excuse me, 2 or 3 years, or what?
Every other year you go up for accreditation again. So we're actually in the process right now of being reaccredited.
Okay, that is excellent to know.
Yes.
Very well done. Now, I want you to tell our viewers, because I went to a presentation that you had, and a couple of things that I was sort of amazed by. You offer this transitional or temporary living kinds of situations. Tell us about the one that is, of course, for crisis purposes, and then one that's a little bit longer.
Right. So we have a shelter, and it is a 50-bed shelter for women and children, and we're able to basically take care of emergency needs there. And so people can be brought in through police department or by contacting our crisis line, and they're able to stay there for a certain period of time where we just offer counseling to them, services to them, case management, and really try to get them back into the community safely. And then there is our Sojourners Inn. And Sojourners Inn is our transitional living. It's a 13-unit apartment complex with 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. And in that, clients can come and stay for up to 2 years. And while they stay there, they have to be working or going to school, and they do pay some sort of rent. However, a portion of their rent is put away into a savings account for them that they can get when they leave the program. Also, when they move into their apartments, the apartments are fully furnished. So all of that furniture they actually get to take with them when they leave the program in the year or 2 years, however long they stay there.
Now, let me stop you on one thing. Excuse me, I'm having a hard time here with congestion, but allergies. They can take the furniture.
They can take the furniture.
Now, what if a person, give me some more criteria for some of these kinds of things, because let's say a person's in your program and then after 6 months or 3 or 4 months, they just can't do it, or they're just not as committed as you feel they need to be. Do they still walk away with those kinds of benefits?
Absolutely, absolutely. We understand that staying at a transitional living can be somewhat difficult because no one can know where you stay. You're in a community of other women, and you have to get along with those other women. There's certain guidelines that we're making sure that you are sticking with while you're in that program. So definitely, some people are going to get in the program and realize this may not just be the program for them, but we still allow them to take that furniture, any money in their savings account they're still able to take with them. Okay,
now are these women, do they have to have children, or can it be just where they have been the victims of some type of abusive or violent situation? How does that work?
Right. There is an application process. You must be a victim of domestic violence or sexual assault. We only take women and children. It can be single women, so because we do have 1 bedrooms there, and so it can be single women. They have to, again, be working or going to school, have to be able to get along in that community, no contact with perpetrator unless it's like supervised contact because we can't have the perpetrator on the premises, of course, because we're protecting not only one person's safety, but the safety of everyone there.
Okay. Now, with this too, what about transportation concerns?
Oh, we actually have a program where we're able to help them if they have a vehicle and it's not working. We're actually able to help them with funds to get the vehicle working, or we work with local mechanics here in the Tulsa area that actually are able to offer us free or discounted services.
That is excellent. Now, with the children that are in the program, maybe the children haven't been abused themselves, but they've been in that environment. While they're in these transitional living or in the shelter situation, is there some type of, you mentioned children programs, give us a little more of an example of what kind of programs the children, the smaller children especially, would be involved in?
Sure. Now, children do not have to see or hear domestic violence in order to be affected by it. And so whenever children live in homes where domestic violence occurs, they are affected by it. And our job is really to intervene in that process to make sure those children do not grow up and repeat the process, which is some of what you're going to be talking about today, where teenagers have lived in that home environment and now they're repeating the process. And so we really want to intervene. And so whenever they come to any of our facilities, whether it be our transitional living, our shelter, or even our counseling office, we have children's counseling available, and we do that from ages 3 to 18. And these children, they can come in for individual therapy. Children at our Sojourners Inn actually sometimes have group therapy. And it's just a way of the counselors interacting with them and talking about what they experienced, addressing the trauma that they experienced living in homes where domestic violence was occurring.
Now, when you talk about children even as young as 3, some people may wonder what kind of therapy can you help them with? I know that there's play therapy. Now, do you use that in drawings? I mean, how do you help bring out in the child what they're feeling or experiencing?
Absolutely. So children as young as 3, they still can experience trauma, and they definitely still act out the effects of that trauma. They just may not always have the words to communicate to us exactly what they're feeling. And so that's exactly what play therapy does. Or we also have parent-child interaction therapy, and that's just a therapy where we involve the mother and child and actually take the counselor out of the situation and allow the parent and child to interact with the counselor just kind of being a coach there. Okay. And so it really just rebuilds the relationship between parent and child, because it's difficult to parent if you're in an abusive relationship. It's difficult to parent effectively where your kids aren't feeling like they're secure, and we want to make sure that we address that.
Okay, and in some of these counseling services, are they available 24/7, as they say? So in the middle of the night, if the person is feeling anxious or stressful or a crisis while they're in their shelter, or are there people readily available or in transitional living?
Now, at our shelter, we always have advocates available. So we have advocates that stay at the shelter 24/7. Our counselors are there normally during the day and even after hours for group therapy. At our at our transitional living, we have counselors there as well, but we don't have advocates that stay overnight. Okay. Our crisis line is always the best way to receive 24-hour service. And so we've ensured that with all of our clients, if it's the middle of the night, you're having a difficult time, contact our crisis line. Okay. Let one of the advocates talk with you and just kind of go with you through that until you feel comfortable enough, until the next day where you can come in for services.
Okay. Well, thank you, Angela. Tell our viewers to stay put, because we're going to have a person who's going to share their personal story. And then in our last segment, I'm going to bring you back to look at some other issues.
Great.
Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to continue our discussion talking about domestic violence and those affecting teens and teen issues with violence. Joining me for this segment is Maria, and I just want to let you know that we're masking her identity for her own safety. Welcome to the program, Maria.
Thank you.
Now I want you to just start telling us your story. Share your story.
Okay. I was raised in a normal childhood. I did not go through any abuse or witness it when I was a child. I was not affirmed or basically built up, have a security in myself. So I did have very low self-esteem going into high school. Mm-hmm. And that is where I met my abuser. Basically, no boyfriends before that, very first relationship, any kind of experience with that. And it started out really good, got me things that I really enjoyed, nice gifts, and told me everything I wanted to hear as far as building up my self-esteem.
Now, let me ask you this, Maria, and then I'm going to let you continue.
Yeah.
When you said it was in high school, how young were you?
I was 17.
17. Okay. So he was getting you these nice gifts and things that really, materially, as they say, a girl would like to have, right?
Exactly. And, saying the sweet things that you want to hear from a guy when you're that age. And then it started slowly deteriorating. He would call me names and break me down verbally, just making me feel belittled. And then the physical abuse started later after we became sexually active. He would pinch me in public and squeeze me, and it would later escalate to kicking, punching, choking me, spitting on me. And so
Let me ask you this while you're kind of working with this, because I know it's very difficult, and I very much appreciate you coming and sharing with us so that maybe we can reach others so they'll know to come and get help and contact DVIS and the crisis line early, that they don't have to go through this alone. When you talked about it, sort of started off very good. I'll sort of recap a few things. But then it deteriorated. How long were the good times? Because sometimes, people may feel that it would take years to get to that, but months or days. How, for you, how long were the good times before the verbal abuse is what started first with you? You're saying he started calling you names and things like that. Kind of how long did it take?
Not long, because I believe it was so dramatic. In my case, it started out immediately amazing and everything you wanted, but slowly manipulation and control, those things you don't really, it's not obvious. And for me, it wasn't a red flag. It was little things of jealousy and not wanting me to go to certain places that I just thought, oh, he's being protective. But as far as the verbal abuse starting, it would be in front of his friends. Like, you think it's a joke and you don't get hurt by it, but it keeps getting worse and worse. So I would say it was probably maybe 6 months of just good only, and then it, after that deteriorated.
And what you're saying sounds really very interesting too, because like you said, it's things that as the person who's receiving this, you might not pick up on right away. Because even the gifts and those things can be a form of manipulation, kind of getting you where they want you to be. And the jokes initially don't seem like much, but then they continue and they worsen.
Yes.
Now for you, when this was happening, just in this part, before you even got to the physical abuse, did you have a lot of friends? I mean, were you more of a loner? Were there other people that you talked to about this? How did you view your parents in relation to this? Because sometimes they're the last people you want to say something to. But were you making some changes at home that maybe you think, in looking back, maybe they could have seen? Were you talking with friends? Tell us a little bit about that part.
Yeah, friends. I had a close circle. I wasn't completely loner, but I did not have a bunch of friends. I had a close 5 or 10 friends that I stayed in very much communication with about the relationship, and they all didn't like him, and they didn't straight out say he treats you bad. They're just like, we don't like him, he's not good for you. And I, of course, had feelings for him, so I disregard, and less time would be spent with my friends and more dedicated to him. And with my family, from the very beginning, they did not like him and didn't approve, and disrespectful sort of thing. So I think those are definitely red flags, when time is more dedicated to the boyfriend and they are kind of disappearing from all aspects of life, quitting other extracurricular activities and school, that sort of thing just goes downhill. It's all about the relationship.
Okay, and that's something that is good for us to know, that we should be picking up on, because he's helping to isolate you in terms of only being involved with him and him alone. And you're sort of acquiescing, you're going along with that. And that is one of those red flags, kind of isolate you, and you're dropping out of activities. What about your grades, Maria?
They were great. I was a very good student, and starting high school in the relationship, once we began fighting more and more, I completely gave up in one class and stopped going and failed, and I eventually did graduate, but my score and my grades were not what they could have been if I wasn't involved in that relationship. So it went from A's and B's to failing some classes.
Okay.
So a big difference.
With the relationship, then you said it moved from being just verbally abusive into physically abusive. Share what you would like to share about that transition and what happened with the physical abuse.
Well, like I said, they were the pinching and the small things, grabbing my arm and squeezing, if that was to basically maintain control in public places. If I was doing something he didn't want me to do, if we were in a store and I was mad at him and I walked away, he didn't like that, so he would want to remain control and grab my arm. And then from there it went to, I believe, probably punching me on my arm and that sort of thing. Guys do when they play around, you kind of punch each other and it's a game maybe, but it became when he was angry, and then it much more worse. It went to choking, and he would use objects to hit me with too.
Okay. Now, he obviously, with these kinds of things, I would think, you tell me, if there were physical signs being left, bruisings and things like that, how did you handle that when people focused on that?
I would, if I could, I would wear long sleeve shirts, but if it was ridiculously hot outside, I wouldn't always cover them. And I think my opinion was, subconsciously, I wanted people to know, and I wanted people to ask, even though I wanted to be with him because I was emotionally brainwashed to love him. I wanted people to save me in a way. So I would sometimes cover them up, sometimes not. Several occasions I had black eyes that I tried to cover with makeup, and people still noticed. But yes, there are definitely markings, and some people ask, some people don't, but I think there's a persona about it where people think it's none of their business, but I absolutely disagree. It is our business to protect each other in our community. Some people cannot protect themselves, so I think we need to take action.
So for you, you would think that people should ask. For those that did ask, what kinds of things did you say? Because I imagine, like you're saying, you were emotionally brainwashed.
Yeah.
So your thought pattern was still to protect him and to protect this relationship.
Yeah.
So what was your response?
I would lie about how I got it. One of the black eyes, several different people from work, I'd say one thing, and from school, I'd say another, and from my doctor, I would say a different thing. And just one time I said I bent over to get something and hit it on a drawer, those sort of things, or I fell and hit something. And on the arms, bruises, people never asked about those. I think people kind of think those are normal day-to-day. You get, bumps, but black eyes are kind of a big deal.
Okay. Now, how did this relationship end? How you progressed? It got abusive? Did you separate finally, or?
When we were dating, we would break up a lot, and there was always reasons I went back, but because I believed he could change and, wanted that to change. But finally it stopped when I had gotten pregnant, and I did not want my child witnessing the violence, and it was going to affect them at that time. So that was the final straw for me. But there was many times where we broke up and separated, because we did get married eventually, and final divorce process being done was due to a pregnancy that I just didn't want them affected by it.
Okay, well, as we end with your segment, Maria, I thank you so much. What would you want teens to remember and to know?
Well, first of all, as young girls go into dating relationships, that jealousy is not cute, and it's not something, I think everyone is normally a small amount, but when it's aggressive and they're angry, I think all girls should be treated with the utmost respect, and no one should ever be disrespected, especially females, by their significant other. And for parents, if they think that their child may be in a relationship, to intervene as much as possible, even if the kid hates them for it. They're doing it for their best interest.
Thank you so much, Maria, and I'm pleased that you're on the road to healthy relationships.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. To complete our discussion, talking about domestic violence sort of issues related to teens, joining me again is Angela Mitchell, Education Coordinator with Domestic Violence Intervention Services. Let's jump in. Now, I just talked with Maria. We protected her identity for her safety's sake, and she said a lot of things that were very poignant to me and on point that we need to know. So I want to start with you. by asking you, tell us, what is a healthy relationship look like, and what does one that's not healthy look like, and sort of interpose those for me. Give us some help here.
Absolutely. I always say a healthy relationship, one of the main things you will always have is mutual respect. Someone that genuinely cares about you, genuinely shows you affection, someone that respects your boundaries, someone that respects your time outside of the relationship, someone that is never controlling, respects your need for space, for time with family and friends. All of that is what makes a healthy relationship. Good communication as well. An unhealthy relationship is where someone does not have any respect, has a lot of power and control, does not care about your family and friends, doesn't genuinely care about you and your feelings and your emotions. You don't feel comfortable talking to this person. There's not good communication. The conflict resolution is always negative and can always sometimes lead to a bad place. And so those components make up an unhealthy relationship. The difference, what I want people to understand is that whenever you start a relationship and you do not feel like this person genuinely respects you, respect is one of the biggest words I always talk about when I'm talking about healthy relationships. If you don't feel like this person genuinely respects you, then that is a huge red flag. This relationship is not going to be a healthy one.
Well, let me ask this, because especially for teens who are going through their own emotional development, plus you add another person there with trying to understand that kind of emotional relationship, as Maria mentioned. When the person is doing things for you, as Maria talked about, it starts off really good. You know, they're gifts, they're saying things that you want to hear. It's sort of, you're becoming emotionally brainwashed in some kind of way. How can that teen really clue into the fact that it's just not love because they want to know where I am? Because that can feel like fuzzy good,
Right,
you know, like
right.
that someone cares for me. They want to know where I am and what I'm doing, and I don't mind telling them. When does it become excessive, or where the teen may need to say, something might be wrong here?
Well, first of all, you have to trust your instincts. So whenever I talk to teenagers, I talk to them about, first of all, trusting their instincts. Secondly, develop relationships slowly, because the person you meet in the beginning is not the real person. So that person that is very nice and you never see any flaws, that's just not the real person. So that's why you date someone and 3 months later you realize they really suck because you realize you're getting now to know the real them. And so I always say develop relationships slowly. Whenever we jump in quickly, we never get to really know the real them. Next, jealousy is one of those things that teenagers, they argue me down. They say it's a sign of affection, it's a sign of caring. And what we really do is kind of look at that. So jealousy, first of all, is the opposite of trust. It really comes from our own insecurities. And so when you have someone that's saying, I don't want you to talk to that person, that's not a sign of them caring about you or being cute. That's a sign of them saying they really don't trust you to talk to other people without being disrespectful to them. So that's an issue there. Or if they don't want you to hang out here or go here, is that controlling behavior, or is that behavior that says that cares about you? And so what I challenge teenagers to do is really question their relationship. Look at the relationship, look at the behaviors, and make sure again that those behaviors are reflecting respect, trust, and genuine caring, or is it really controlling behavior?
Now, is there something too, because as Maria mentioned, getting the gifts and saying the things, or of course every girl would want certain kinds of things like that, or every female would. Should it be sort of for teens, and maybe any female, where the gift accepting, and depending on the types of gifts, should be maybe reserved or off limits for a little while? Like you said, you need to get to know the person and that type of thing, because sometimes receiving those things can bring that material, you took this from me, you know, you owe me kind of phenomenon. I mean, what do you think about that?
Right. I go back to boundaries. And so there's a such thing as healthy boundaries, and then there's unhealthy boundaries. Healthy boundary is when I get to know you slowly. Unhealthy boundary is when I get to know you really quickly and I tell you all my information and I start buying you gifts real quickly, and yet I really don't know you as a person. That's an unhealthy boundary. And so what we want teenagers to do is learn to identify those unhealthy boundaries, because no one's talking to them about what those look like. And so you are right. If someone is continually buying me gifts, oh, this is sweet, this is great, but what is all this meaning exactly? And so I know for me as a teenager, if someone brought me something, my mom immediately questioned the motive behind buying that gift. And if it was a negative motive, then I had to give the gift back.
Okay. Let me ask this in about a minute that we have. Tell us really quickly the abuser, because Maria kind of implied that there's a cycle. Remember, she said that we broke on and off a lot, etc., ended up getting married even. Is there a cycle that the abuser goes through in terms of, oh, I'm sorry, I'll never do that again, I love you, I'm going to change, that sort of brings the person back in that they need to be aware of?
Absolutely, there's a cycle. And so most domestic violence relationships follow that cycle where it's like a honeymoon phase, everything's great, and then it's the warning signs, and then it's the abusive episode, and then it's the remorse. Now, some relationships, though, do not follow all of those time frames, meaning some relationships may not have the remorse, some relationships may not have the warning signs. They may go from calm one day to abusive the next. But definitely when they do go into remorse, that is a way of wooing the person back into the relationship.
Okay, and those are things that they need to be aware of and look for and pay attention to, and don't think it's just a one-time thing.
Right. I want them to learn to know, I want them to learn to identify when someone genuinely cares about you. They don't never have to put you down, never have to disrespect you, and they never have to make you feel less than who you are as a person.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining me, Angela, and thank you for all the work and for DVIS.
Thank you.
Well, that's our show. For Health Alert, I'm Pam Butler. I'd love to hear your questions, comments, or suggestions for future shows. Please write me at Health Alert USA, P.O. Box 50913, Tulsa, Oklahoma 74150. Or if you're on the email trail, please email me at healthalertusa@gmail.com. And also visit me on YouTube at youtube.com/healthalertusa. And remember, look for the warning signs. Go slow in a relationship. You have all the time in the world to understand and know who you are and who they are. And if you need help, contact the crisis line. Take care.